State of Decay 2 Juggernaut Edition, 5 years later. Should you guys give it another chance? That's what we're talking about here today. So first, let's quickly talk about all the positives of the game. Let me just say that I bought this game when it came out, 2018, 5 years ago. So let me just say that this is a clean slate. I'm coming in here with no judgments for when the game came out in 2018. It was in a rougher shape, to admit, but clean slate. I'm looking at it from a fresh perspective. So we'll talk about the good things about the game. Okay, so first off, there's 3 game modes, which is great. There's Campaign, Heartland, and Daybreak. Daybreak is your standard wave defense game. Kind of gives you a chance to use all the guns in the game, especially, this is a survival game. You won't be able to use certain guns with tons of ammo in the actual game because, you're rationing. So it's a fun chance just to use a bunch of guns and just do wave defense and just shoot a lot. So that's a fun game mode, but obviously that's not the main attraction. Heartland is actually interesting. So Heartland is basically the story element of the game. The normal campaign is not as much story driven. Heartland is much more a story driven narrative. It takes place on the map of State of Decay 1. So it's essentially just State of Decay 1, because State of Decay 1 did have a story, somewhat of a story. So it's basically State of Decay 1 with that story, but just co-op now, because State of Decay 2 is co-op. State of Decay 1 was only single player. Campaign gives you the option of playing on 5 different maps and selecting your 3 starting characters. Now, the big thing in the game is basically going to be character progression and building mechanics. So characters are very important, obviously, to your group. Different characters give you different bonuses, like gardening, utility work, and construction, just to name 3. Each character also has different leader traits, because when you build a base, you can select the leader. Different leader traits give you different bonuses. For instance, a builder lets you upgrade certain buildings beyond the normal progression. Trader lets you build a trading depot where you can summon traders on demand. There's other ones like Warlord and Sheriff that all give different bonuses. And you can pick whatever leader you want at any moment. You can demote one and increase another. In order to get these characters to the point where they can lead, you need to progress them. I think it starts at Recruit, and then Citizen, and then finally there's Hero status. Hero is the highest you can go. If your character is a Hero status, they can be upgraded to leader, only 1 leader for each group, obviously. So you need to play with each character. Now, you can play with each character equally, or you can focus on one character if you want. These characters do get tired. There's a day and night cycle, so you can only use one character for about 12 hours-ish, about half a day before they start to get tired, and they won't have as much energy, and their health will go down a bit. So you need to rotate the characters you use. Each character also has the same traits, the same normal traits. One of them is like cardio. And once you max out a trait like cardio, you can specialize the trait into a specific bonus, like increased stamina or carrying capacity that's specific for cardio. And once you keep using that character, you can then boost that new trait up as well. I think this whole character progression is really great. It keeps you invested in the character, and it allows you to focus your efforts on increasing specific skills and traits. These characters also become important to managing your base. You want certain characters get higher traits, become a hero, and make them eligible for your leader. For instance, you might have a character who has a build leadership, so you focus on building that character's progression, getting them to hero, and then you can make them your leader and get the builder bonus. Now, this all takes place under the basically umbrella of the base and outpost building mechanic of the game, which is the main part of the game. It's what you're going to be spending most of your time doing. Influence is the currency of the game, and you need lots of influence to take new bases and outpost locations. Influence is easiest to get by completing quests and clearing infested locations, as well as play cards. The base building in the game, I think, is really great. I think it's where I was invested most of my time in, because it allows you to not only choose different base locations, which there's many of. I think there's 5 to 8 base locations average for each map, about 5 to 8 depending on the map you pick, and you can customize those obviously as much as you want. But obviously some bases are going to be larger than others. Some are going to have more building spots for different base components, like generator, watchtower, bunk beds, and a garden. Bigger bases require more influence and a larger groups to take. So for instance, 3,500 influence and 8 group members is the largest base requirements, and that takes a long time to build towards. Recruiting survivors to a group also requires influence, as well as completing quests for these groups. But groups only spawn every so often. This makes progressing from your starter base to a larger base slow. This makes the progression from your starter base to that amazing base that's on the map it makes it a goal to work towards over the span of your campaign. And even though it might take a long time to get to that larger base, I like having a long-term goal of, I want to get to this base, so I know that I have to get this much influence, all these group members, all these resources, and then I can move into this larger base that I've been working towards all this time. Now, all these things I've said are what is great about the game and has what kept me playing these last few days. But past 10 hours or so, the repetitiveness starts to creak in a bit. Once you have the big base and all the big outposts and all the bonuses and all the ammo you want and all the resources, then what exactly is there to do? And this isn't exactly a task that takes a long time to do. 10 to 20 hours really, and you have everything that you'll ever need. What is there to do exactly? Well, you can abandon your base and all your outposts and take your group and your resources to a new map to do it all over again, essentially. That's where the game really falls apart, because with all these maps you can choose from, there is a lot of replayability, but there really isn't any end game. The end game is essentially just choosing a new map and doing it all over again. Now, the difficulty scale is good. There's 5 different difficulties, and increasing the difficulty will increase the replayability a little bit, but it still runs into the same problem of there's nothing to do but basically change the map again. Now, the big thing about State of Decay 2 is that it is co-op. Now, everyone who plays State of Decay 1, including myself, was just begging for the game to be co-op. The problem is co-op just doesn't work very well, and I would go as far as to say that playing the game by yourself certainly would make the playability longer. You can replayability, you can play the game for longer, but I would say it's actually a better experience to play alone. That's because of how co-op functions in game. So for instance, if you have 2 players in game and they separate too far apart from each other, they will actually be teleported back to each other, or one will be teleported back to the other. So I kind of understand why that happens in game, because you want them working together, but it basically means that both co-op players can only be working on the same task at the same time. You guys can't separate and complete different tasks at the same time. I can understand the mechanic working for certain things like quests, but just simply looting different buildings, you know, in one town versus another town, you can't do that. That's a big problem in the game. Not only this, but when I played co-op, there was a lot of rubber banding going on and a decent amount of lag issues in the game. And that's just with 2 players. So you can only imagine how worse it gets when you add more players to that. And that's really a disappointment, because everyone really wanted co-op for State of Decay, and that's really the big reason why State of Decay 2 was made, was basically because everyone was begging them to make a co-op version of the game, and they finally did, and then this is what we get. It just doesn't work as well as any other co-op game, and certainly not the game that everyone was waiting for. So overall, I think you can have a decent experience with it. You can have an enjoyable 10 to 20 hours. You know, if you increase the difficulty, those hours might increase. There are a lot of sound character progression, and the base building mechanics in the game will keep you invested and interested for a long time. But there always comes a point in the campaign where you say to yourself, like, well, what's the next step? What's the next long-term goal? What's the next progression for my playthrough? And then there isn't any, except to basically change the map and do everything you already did for the last 20 hours over again on a new map. So not a bad game. It just has some problems. Single player wise, I actually think this game is better single player. If you played it by yourself, you would have a decent amount of fun. Look at the prices, decide for yourself, guys. I think it's an okay game to get. Just know what you're getting into. Thanks for watching, guys.